Stories never heard before. The silent march of Ashen fields. The battlefield had long since fallen silent, but silence did not mean peace. It meant absence, absence of voices, absence of laughter, and absence of the familiar rhythm of life. Abhimanyu lay among the broken earth, his body torn by shrapnel, his breath shallow yet stubborn. He had once been a man of unshakable strength, his shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of comrades' hopes. Now, he was reduced to a trembling figure, his uniform soaked in blood, his vision blurred by dust and pain. The world around him was a wasteland of ash and twisted metal. The air carried the acrid scent of smoke, mingled with the faint sweetness of crushed grass beneath the destruction. He tried to move, but his leg refused him, mangled beyond recognition. A surge of despair threatened to drown him, whispering that he was finished, that the earth itself would swallow him whole. Yet, somewhere deep within, a spark flickered, a refusal to surrender. He thought of his mother's voice, soft but firm, telling him as a boy, that resilience was not about strength, but about endurance. The river cuts through stone not because it is strong, but because it never stops flowing, she had said. That memory became his anchor. Abhimanyu pressed his hand against the wound, gritted his teeth, and dragged himself inch by inch, towards the faint outline of a ruined farmhouse, in the distance. The farmhouse was barely standing, its roof collapsed, its walls fractured. But to Abhimanyu, it was sanctuary. He crawled inside, collapsing against a splintered beam. His body screamed for rest, but his mind refused to yield. He tore strips from his tattered uniform, binding his leg with trembling hands. Each knot was a declaration, I will not die here. Days blurred into nights. Hunger gnawed at him, thirst clawed at his throat. He scavenged what little remained, stale grain from a broken sack, rainwater collected in a rusted tin. His body weakened, but his spirit sharpened. Every sunrise was a victory, every breath a rebellion against despair. During these feverish stretches of isolation, Abhimanyu found that the silence of the farmhouse was often louder than what the roar of the cannons had been. To combat the encroaching darkness of his mind, he began to visualize the orchard he had always dreamed of planting, mapping out the placement of every sapling, in the dust on the floor. He decided that the northern edge would be for sturdy apples, while the center would hold the delicate cherries, that reminded him of his sister's laughter. By building this future brick by mental brick, he transformed his temporary prison into a site of internal architecture. He realized that survival was not just a matter of mending torn flesh, but of maintaining a destination worth reaching. He practiced forgiving himself for being the one who lived, understanding that his continued heartbeat was a responsibility he owed to those who could no longer breathe. This mental labor became as vital as the water he collected. It kept his soul from atrophying, while his leg slowly knit itself back together. He was no longer just a soldier waiting for the end, he was a gardener waiting for the spring, tending to the invisible roots of a life he refused to abandon. He began to speak aloud, though no one was there to listen. He told stories to the empty air, stories of his childhood, of fishing by the river, of chasing fireflies with his sister. He spoke of dreams yet unfulfilled. Of the orchard he had promised to plant, when the fighting was over. These words were not for company, they were for survival. They reminded him that he was more than a wounded soldier, he was a man with a life worth reclaiming. Sometimes, he imagined his sister sitting beside him, her laughter echoing in the broken beams. Sometimes, he pictured his father's stern but kind eyes, urging him to rise. These visions were not hallucinations, they were lifelines. They stitched together the fragments of his will, keeping him tethered to hope. Weeks passed. His wounds festered, but he fought them with crude remedies, ashes to dry infection, pressure to stop bleeding. His hands shook, but his will remained steady. He fashioned a crutch from broken wood, testing his weight against it. The first step was agony, the second nearly impossible. but the third, though clumsy, was triumph. He began to walk again, slowly, painfully, across the ashen fields. Each step was a testament to resilience, a defiance of fate. He stumbled often, collapsing into the dirt, but he always rose. The earth became his adversary and his ally, teaching him patience, teaching him humility. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Abhimanyu stood atop a hill, overlooking the ruins. His body was scarred, his gait uneven, but his eyes burned with quiet fire. He realized then, that resilience was not about returning to who he had been, it was about becoming someone new, forged by suffering yet unbroken. He began to mark his progress by carving lines, into the wood of his crutch. Each line was a step survived, a day endured. Soon, the crutch became more than support, it became a record of his defiance, a testament to his journey. Months later, Abhimanyu found a village untouched by the devastation. The people stared at him, this limping figure, with hollow cheeks and haunted eyes. Some turned away, unwilling to face the embodiment of war's cruelty. But others stepped forward, offering bread, water, and shelter. Abhimanyu accepted with gratitude, though he carried no illusions. He knew recovery was not a gift, it was a journey. He worked alongside them, tending fields, repairing homes. His body protested, but his spirit thrived. Children gathered around him, listening to his stories of resilience, of survival in the ruins. He taught them that scars were not marks of weakness, but of endurance. He showed them his mangled leg, saying, "This is not the end of me. This is the proof that I endured." In time, Abhimanyu planted his orchard. Each sapling was a prayer, each blossom a promise. He tended them with care, watching them grow as he too grew, slowly, painfully, beautifully. The orchard became his sanctuary. When the wind rustled through the leaves, he heard echoes of his mother's voice. When blossoms fell to the ground, he saw his sister's laughter. The orchard was not just trees, it was memory, resilience, and recovery made flesh. Years passed. The orchard flourished, its branches heavy with fruit. Abhimanyu, though aged and limping, walked among the trees with pride. He had transformed his pain into purpose, his wounds into wisdom. He became a symbol for the village, a living testament to resilience. Children who once listened to his stories, now brought their own children to hear them. Abhimanyu spoke not of battles or victories, but of endurance, of the silent march through suffering toward recovery. He told them that resilience was not about never falling. It was about rising every time the world tried to keep you down. He often sat beneath the largest tree, its roots deep and strong, its branches wide enough to shelter many. There, he would close his eyes and remember the ashen fields, the farmhouse, the crutch carved with lines. He remembered the pain, but he remembered more vividly, the will that carried him through. And, when he finally rested beneath the shade of his orchard, he smiled. His body bore the scars of war, but his spirit bore the fruits of resilience. He had not been defeated. He had endured, recovered, and lived. After the orchard began to bloom, Abhimanyu found himself drawn to teaching. He gathered the children beneath the trees, telling them stories not of destruction, but of endurance. He spoke of rivers that carved valleys, of seeds that broke through stone, of birds that returned after storms. His words became lessons, his scars became symbols. One boy asked him, "Were you afraid when you were alone?" Abhimanyu paused, his gaze drifting to the horizon. "Yes," he said softly. "Fear was my companion. But fear is not the enemy, it is the test. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to walk forward despite it." The villagers began to see him not as a broken man but as a guide. They sought his counsel when crops failed, when disputes arose, when grief weighed heavy. Abhimanyu never claimed wisdom, but he offered perspective. Resilience is not about bending the world, to your will. It is about bending yourself without breaking. Seasons passed. The orchard grew dense, its shade cool and inviting. Abhimanyu carved benches from fallen branches, creating a place where villagers could gather. Weddings were celebrated beneath the blossoms, children played among the roots, elders rested in the shade. The orchard became more than Abhimanyu's sanctuary, it became the heart of the community. Yet Abhimanyu never forgot the silence of the battlefield. At night, he sometimes woke with the echo of explosions in his ears, his body trembling with memory. But instead of despair, he turned those moments into ritual. He would rise, walk among the trees, and whisper to them, "You are my proof. You are my recovery." One winter, illness struck the village. Abhimanyu, though frail, tended to the sick, carrying water, gathering herbs, telling stories to ease their fear. His orchard became a refuge, its fruits sustaining the weak. When the sickness passed, the villagers said, "It was Abhimanyu who saved us." But Abhimanyu shook his head. "No," he said. "It was resilience. It was the choice to endure together." As years turned into decades, Abhimanyu's hair grew white, his steps slower. Yet, his spirit remained unbroken. He often told the children, "My orchard is not mine, it is yours." It is the proof that wounds can become wisdom, that pain can become purpose. And when Abhimanyu finally lay beneath the largest tree, the villagers gathered. They did not mourn him as a fallen soldier, but celebrated him as a man who had turned suffering into sanctuary. His orchard lived on, bearing fruit, sheltering generations, whispering resilience through its leaves. And his story remained with the villagers for strength, for endurance, and for his silent march of ashen fields. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of resilience.